Welcome to our Shushoku Cafe YouTube video series. Today we're talking about the JET program. This is part 2 in the JET series. The previous video is about what the JET, how to get into the JET program. And this one, we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about what the JET program is, what it looks like. And we, Takeshi and I, have 2 special guests from the US JET Alumni Association. We've got Jessica, and also a former JET who works at Quick USA with Takeshi-san. We have Carlos. So we're going to I'm going to baton touch to Takeshi-san, who's going to ask the first question. And we are all dying to know all about the JET program.
All right. So first of all, I want to know, JET going to Japan, but it might be different between if you got in a big city or rural or suburban area or something like that. So can you tell us what might be expected to be being different locations? Can you tell us a little bit, Jessica?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So generally speaking, when we look at Japan, most people think of Japan as like super urban and bright lights and really exciting, but there's a lot of Japan that's actually countryside and rural area. And most of the JETs end up getting placed in these suburban or rural areas. And that's because the need for teachers, foreign teachers, to be integrated into the classroom is higher in those suburban and rural areas. In urban areas, there's gaijin all over the place, right? There's lots of opportunities to interact with foreigners, but not so much in the suburban and rural areas. So I think there's more placements for JETs in those suburban and rural areas. I was a very rural JET. I was in the northern island of Hokkaido in a very small town that had about 2,000 people that lived in the town proper and 5,000 people that lived in the whole county. And it was a farming county, so it was a very big county. But I had spent time in Japan before going on the JET program. I'd spent about 5 years in Japan prior to my JET experience. But my JET experience in rural Japan was absolutely magical. And the reason is that really it's not your latitude and your longitude that make your experience in Japan on the JET program so wonderful. It's the community that you become a part of. And anybody that goes to Japan on the JET program is integrated into their community. And so you have the opportunity to make it what you want it to be. And the other thing that I really loved about, the one thing I really loved about my rural community is nobody was going to come to my town on vacation. There is no hotel there. We had 2 traffic lights in my whole town. Nobody is coming to my town. So that was an experience that you cannot get as a tourist. It's just not available. But I could still go to Tokyo and Osaka and Kobe and all these really large cities in Sapporo. I could have that experience. But I also got to have this very personal experience in rural Japan. And so that's one of the things that I loved about my rural experience. Carlos, what about you?
Well, I was also placed in you could call it a rural area, but it was more of a semi-rural area. The closest city was about a 20 to 30-minute train ride away. But I got to experience all the positives of living in a smaller town, right? Just like Jessica said, the community, I believe, is a lot closer, right? You are part of that community when you immerse yourself by joining the local events. They treat you like one of their own, and it was a great experience. I do remember, going to one of my schools. We had to drive through a lot of cabbage fields and rice fields, and I'm just like, yeah, this is the rural area. This is the Inaka, and I'm enjoying it, right? But yeah, honestly, it was it had a lot of positives being in the rural area. When it comes to some cons, maybe we didn't have access to certain things. We had access to the essentials. I had a supermarket and all that good stuff, even a gym. That was pretty good. But if I wanted to enjoy, go out with other jets and stuff like that, I would have to go to the closest city, which was normally, which had karaoke's and all that stuff. But overall, it was a great experience. Yeah.
I think something to be aware of too is if you're in a rural area, it can be a lot more of a fishbowl type experience too, where you're the only foreigner. I was the only foreigner for pretty much an hour in any direction, and so everybody was very, very interested in me. and my life and what I bought at the grocery store and where I went running and all of these personal things, right? So you have to be comfortable with that. Eventually, the longer you're there, the less your community cares about what you're buying at the grocery store, right? They get to know you. But if you're living in a big city, you have a lot more anonymity. So, you have a lot more amenities like Carlos mentioned, but you can, you don't have that same fishbowl experience. But the con of that can be sometimes you have to work a little bit harder to make your community too. You have to do a little more work to build your friend base.
Wow. It's a very different experience, but both of them might be very interesting and very exciting. One more additional question. I have a question. So now we talk about like differences between cities, but I think for the JET, there's some different type of the positions. Like one is LT, the other one is CRR, and the other one is CEA. So can you explain to me what might be like a differences between them?
Yeah, Carlos, you were an ALT, right?
Yeah, I was an ALT. So let me just go ahead and just do a quick overview of what an ALT is. And it stands for, the acronym starts for Assisted Language Teacher. And what you do is you mainly work at public schools anywhere from kindergarten to high school, depending on where you are placed. And depending on the level that you work in, you tend to work either as a T1, which is the leading teacher, or as a T2, which would be assisting a teacher, right? And then in my case, I used to work at a middle school, so I mainly did T2, tried to maintain like a positive environment, like a comfortable environment where the students were comfortable studying English, and every now and then just go ahead and providing, supporting the teacher by providing, activities and making the students, enjoy, or making the students active within the class itself. As an ALT, you also had other English support related activities, such as helping your students with English speaking contests. You get to practice with them, you get to help them, which is very rewarding. It's a fun thing to do. And outside of class, you also get to, if you have the chance, you get to join your students' different clubs, like sports clubs, and you get to immerse yourself a little bit more within the culture itself. Join their baseball club or join their table tennis club. Overall, a pretty good ALTs are pretty good experience, to be honest. Hi.
Yeah, so I think about 90% of the positions on the JET program are for ALTs, and about 10% are for a position called CIR, and that stands for Coordinator for International Relations. And it's a broad term, but that's because the different jobs within CIR, the different roles that CIRs take can be quite varied. So you could be working, in a town hall or a town office or a prefectural office as a CIR. You might be, you could do anything from creating a web page that showcases that town or that prefecture, and making it accessible for foreigners to attract more tourism. You might be doing live interpretation when delegations from foreign countries come over to visit, your town in Japan or your city in Japan. You could be putting together an international festival that your city or your prefecture puts on every year. And you still might have English teaching responsibilities as well. You might be offering like English classes for adults in your community. So your experience as a CIR, it doesn't have as tight of a job description as the ALT does, and that's just because there's so many different roles and responsibilities that you could potentially have as a CIR. And then the last position is an SEA, Sports Education Advisor. And I always joke that this is the position that everybody has heard of and nobody has seen. There are very, very few SEAs. They do exist and they do come over, but there's not very many of them. And they tend to be kind of like semi-professional athletes, basically. And they're coming to do really specific work with groups of kids in Japan. So sometimes it could be like somebody who's coming over to be a soccer coach for a pretty elite group of soccer players or something like that. So I would say if you're considering the JET program, think really about what you want to do and what would be meaningful to you. The other thing to make note of is that your language abilities for these are need to be pretty different. So for a CIR position, you want to have quite high level Japanese, and I would say probably Nikyu if you're familiar with the Japanese language proficiency test, because you're operating all day long with business level Japanese. And obviously, if you're doing translation or interpretation, you need to have that level of Japanese. For the ALT position, even though it's great to have Japanese language abilities because you're interacting with professionally interacting with folks all day, you don't actually need to speak any Japanese to be accepted on the JET program. And the reason is you're there to share your culture, so and your language. So although it's really helpful to have Japanese, it's not required for the ALT position.
Wow, that sounds interesting. Do you have any question, Kasia-san?
Yeah, it just kind of makes me want to apply for the CIR role, but I have met a lot of people who their dream is to become an interpreter or a translator, so they have very high levels of spoken and written Japanese. I find that when those people go on a CIR assignment, they come back cho pera pera, so very, very fluent, and it's a great career path if you do that. So that's just a suggestion I have heard.
All right. I want to ask a question. Like now we talk about what you do in the JET, but that while you are in the JET, you did different things. Not only that working as a JET, like not work things, like doing volunteer in there. Like how was your experience other than working as a JET?
Carlos, I'll let you go first.
Right. Thank you, Jessica. Yeah. So outside of work, really, it's the more you can get involved with your local community, the better. Just join your local community's festivals, volunteer. This will help you on the long run to build more and more skills, good experience, and intercultural related skills. And overall, just kind of enjoy. Really, I remember joining a lot of festivals, volunteering for a lot of festivals, and my local community was just very thankful, and I was very thankful for letting me join these festivities and learn more about not only Japanese culture but the local culture itself from the town that I was living in. So definitely volunteering and joining local events is something that I would recommend you do.
Yeah, I think one thing to remember that as a JET program participant, you're actually being paid with taxpayer money. And I think that's not something that all JETs are aware of when they go on the program, but that's how your salary is being paid. So you're a town worker, or you're part of your town staff or your prefectural staff, just like your colleagues are. And so anytime that there is an event that's being hosted by your contracting organization, by your town hall, by your board of education, by your prefectural office, you should totally volunteer to be involved in that, just the same way that your colleagues are. And not only do I feel like that's sort of a moral responsibility of yours, that falls outside of your job description, but oh my gosh, you will make the best friends by doing that. You get to interact with your colleagues and your coworkers in a completely different atmosphere, and that's what really makes those relationships shine, and that provides a foundation for true friendships, which are different than your professional relationships with those people. So some examples of stuff that I did while I was on JET: I was part of my town's badminton team. And this is not badminton like playing in a park. This is like serious badminton. So that was a really fun, activity that I did. And I'm still in touch with some of my teammates. I was just like Carlos and probably most JETs where, we participate in our town festivals, whether that means carrying the omikoshi, with your colleagues, or, it might be, clearing the streets and putting up cones to get ready for a festival. It could be anything. I threw pottery with a group of ladies that lived in my community. But every town, even like small rural towns like mine, have a lot going on. There is a community center, there's a sports center, there's a million community activities. So talk to whoever your supervisor is and get a list of those activities that exists. And then just jump in and be really proactive and put yourself out there. And that's where the friendships are formed.
All right, that sounds so exciting, and I understand like you all just have so many great experience by yourself as well. And one thing I want to mention is like I'm from Japan, and on my story, like I was from a very rural little town, and there's no foreigners, and then the teacher was the first foreigner I met. And it was very wow, and it changed my world. Like, oh, world is big. I want to go see abroad. I want to see every places. And then now, thanks for that, I studied abroad in Spain. Now somehow living in US more than 10 years. So doing the jet is, of course, it's great experience for you as well. But also you have a chances to change the life of somebody else for some Japanese students. So I think that would be very nice experience doing the jet.
Yeah, you never know whose lives you're going to touch. And sometimes you don't know until years afterwards. I have a student that I'm still in touch with. She was a student of mine when she was in middle school, and now she lives in the United States. She's married to an American guy. We still keep in touch. We send Christmas cards to each other every year, and it's been really fun to watch her personal journey going from a really small farming town in the middle of nowhere in Hokkaido to all of a sudden living in the United States. So you never know what your impact will be as a JET program participant.
Mm.
Oh my gosh, thank you both so much for sharing these stories. I don't know about you, Takeshi-san, but it kind of makes me want to apply and see what this experience is like. And everybody who's listening and watching, if you have any questions, check out, we'll have some links in the description. You'll be able to see, how you can apply. Definitely check out the video that we created before this on the actual application. And as we mentioned in the previous video, this JET program is an immersive program. It is something that you're living in Japan, you're paying the bills, you're just one of the people in your city. And it is not a study abroad program. It is something that will absolutely change your life. And you as a representative of your country, you're going to change others' lives, just like we heard in the stories today. So thank you for watching this Shushoku Cafe video. Come back for our next one, the third in the series. We're going to talk about post-jet life. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.